Most people spend their lives trying to change what they see without ever questioning the one who is seeing it. They chase better circumstances, better opportunities, better outcomes, believing that if the outer world improves, then they themselves will finally feel different. But this is where the misunderstanding begins. The outer world has never been the cause. It has always been the reflection. You do not become successful and then feel like a successful person. You first accept internally that you are that person, and then the world begins to mirror it back to you. This is the shift that changes everything. Identity is not something you earn, it is something you assume. And once assumed, it quietly dictates your thoughts, your reactions, your expectations, and ultimately your results. Think about it. Every decision you make is filtered through who you believe you are. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you will unconsciously choose paths that confirm struggle. If you see yourself as someone overlooked, you will notice rejection even where opportunity exists. Not because the world is fixed that way, but because your identity acts as the lens through which all of life is interpreted. So the real question is not, how do I change my circumstances? The real question is, who am I being in relation to these circumstances? Because the moment that answer changes, everything else begins to rearrange itself. There is a version of you that already exists, the version who has what you desire, who moves with certainty, who thinks differently, who expects differently. And that version is not waiting for permission from the outside world, it is waiting for recognition from within. The shift is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you have the ability to be, and then daring to occupy that identity now. This requires a kind of inner honesty. You must observe the silent beliefs you carry about yourself. Not the ones you speak out loud, but the ones you return to when no one is watching. Because those are the beliefs shaping your reality. Those are the assumptions creating the patterns you keep experiencing. And once you see that clearly, you realize something powerful. Nothing outside of you needs to change first. You don't need better timing, better luck, or better conditions. You need a new self-concept, a new agreement with yourself about who you are. When you shift your identity even slightly, your thoughts begin to change. Your reactions soften or strengthen. Your decisions become aligned with a different version of you. And over time, what once felt out of reach begins to feel natural. Not because the world suddenly became generous, but because you are no longer the same person interpreting it. This is why two people can walk through the same reality and experience completely different lives. One sees limitation, the other sees possibility. One confirms doubt, the other confirms belief. The difference is not the world, it is identity. So stop trying to force the outer world to comply. Stop waiting for proof before you believe. Instead, turn inward and ask yourself, who would I be if this were already true? And then begin to think from that place, feel from that place, decide from that place. Because the moment you truly accept a new identity, reality has no choice but to follow. Now, once this begins to settle within you, another subtle but powerful realization must take place. It is not enough to understand that identity shapes reality. You must also release the habit of trying to become that identity. Because the moment you are trying, you are unconsciously affirming that you are not. There is a quiet contradiction in effort when it comes to transformation. The more you strain to become something, the more you reinforce the distance between who you are and who you think you need to be. You say, I am trying to be confident, and in that very statement you declare that confidence is not yet yours. You say, I am working on becoming successful, and you unknowingly accept that success belongs somewhere in the future, separate from you. But transformation does not respond to effort in this way. It responds to embodiment. It responds to the state you occupy, not the one you chase. Consider how naturally you express the identity you already believe to be true. You do not try to be yourself. You do not rehearse how to think your own thoughts or feel your own emotions. It flows without resistance because it has been accepted. In the same way, the identity you desire must move from something you are attempting to achieve into something you are willing to assume. This is where the real shift occurs. You stop asking, how do I get there? And begin asking, what would it feel like if I were already there? And more importantly, you allow yourself to experience that feeling now, not as imagination alone, but as a present reality within you. When you begin to be the person you once thought you had to become, everything changes in a way that feels almost effortless. Your thoughts no longer need to be forced into alignment. They begin to arise naturally from your new state. Your actions no longer feel like discipline. They feel like expressions of who you are. Even your reactions to challenges begin to shift because you are no longer responding as your old self. And yet this is where many hesitate. They wait for evidence before they allow themselves to be. They look to the outer world for confirmation, and when it does not immediately appear, they return to trying. But the outer world is always delayed. It reflects what has already been accepted within, not what is still being questioned. So if you are waiting for circumstances to change before you allow yourself to feel different, you will remain in the same cycle. Trying, hoping, doubting, and trying again. But the moment you decide to be without condition, you break that cycle completely. This does not mean pretending or forcing emotion. It means gently, consistently returning to the awareness of who you choose to be, regardless of what the senses report. It means thinking from that identity in quiet moments, feeling its naturalness and allowing it to become familiar, not through struggle but through acceptance. Because what you accept as true about yourself will always express itself, and what you continue to try for will always remain just out of reach. So release the effort, let go of the need to become, and step fully into the experience of being. Be it now. As you begin to understand what it means to be rather than to try, your attention naturally turns to something even more immediate, something you are carrying with you in every moment, whether you are aware of it or not. That is your state. Your state of mind is not just a passing mood or a reaction to circumstances. It is the very atmosphere in which your life unfolds. It is the unseen force that shapes how you perceive the world, how you interpret events, and how you respond to everything that comes before you. Most people move through life at the mercy of their state. They feel uplifted when things appear to go well and discouraged when they do not. They allow circumstances to dictate how they feel, and then they unknowingly use that feeling to create more of the same. In this way, they become caught in a cycle, reacting to a world that is only reflecting what they have already accepted within themselves. But the one who understands the nature of their state begins to see something entirely different. They realize that their state does not have to be a reaction, it can be a choice. And in that choice lies an extraordinary kind of power. Your state is like a magnet, silently drawing experiences that correspond to it. When you dwell in a state of certainty, you begin to notice opportunities, solutions, and pathways that once seemed hidden. When you dwell in a state of doubt, even the clearest opportunities can appear uncertain or out of reach. The world has not changed in either case. What has changed is the lens through which you are viewing it. This is why mastering your state is not about controlling every thought or forcing yourself into constant positivity. It is about becoming aware of the state you are occupying and gently directing it toward the version of yourself you have chosen to be. It is about recognizing when you have slipped into an old pattern of thinking and feeling, and instead of judging it or resisting it, simply shifting your attention back to the state that aligns with your desired identity. You begin to ask yourself, how would I feel if I were already that person? How would I see this situation? How would I respond? And then, without waiting for anything outside of you to confirm it, you allow yourself to enter that state now. Not perfectly, not all at once, but deliberately. At first it may feel unfamiliar, even unnatural. That is only because you have spent so much time identifying with a different state. But the more you return to this new state, the more it begins to feel like home. And as it becomes familiar, it begins to express itself without effort. You will notice that your reactions change. Situations that once triggered doubt or frustration no longer hold the same power over you. You begin to respond with a quiet confidence, a sense of inner stability that is not dependent on immediate results. And from this place, your actions become more aligned, more intentional, and more effective. What is happening here is subtle but profound. You are no longer waiting for the world to change in order to feel differently. You are choosing your state first, and allowing the world to reorganize itself around that choice. This is the true meaning of power, not control over circumstances, but control over the state from which you experience them. Because once your state is aligned, everything that follows begins to align as well. So do not underestimate the significance of how you feel in this moment. Do not dismiss it as temporary or unimportant. It is the very foundation upon which your reality is being built. Choose it wisely and remain there. As you begin to gain awareness of your state and the quiet power it holds, you are led to something even more fundamental, something that operates beneath both your thoughts and your feelings. These are your assumptions. not the ones you casually entertain for a moment, but the ones you consistently return to, the ones you accept as true without question. These assumptions, whether you realize it or not, are shaping the very structure of your experience. You do not experience life as it is. You experience life as you assume it to be. Every situation, every interaction, every outcome is filtered through these inner agreements you have made with yourself. And because they feel so natural, so familiar, you rarely stop to question them. You simply live from them and then call the results reality. If you assume that things rarely work out for you, you will begin to notice evidence that confirms it. Not because the world is determined to oppose you, but because your awareness is attuned to that pattern. If you assume that you are valued, capable, and supported, you will begin to experience life through that lens as well. The same world, the same opportunities, yet an entirely different experience. This is why assumptions are so powerful. They do not require effort to operate. They do not need constant reinforcement. Once accepted, they begin to express themselves automatically. They shape your expectations, and your expectations influence your behavior in subtle but significant ways. You may not even realize how often you act in alignment with what you assume to be true. Consider how many times you have approached a situation already expecting a certain outcome. Perhaps you anticipated rejection, or difficulty, or delay, and without realizing it, your thoughts, your tone, your actions all aligned with that expectation. Then, when the outcome matched what you assumed, it felt like confirmation. But in truth, it was creation. The same principle works in your favor when you begin to choose your assumptions consciously. When you decide with quiet certainty that something is already true for you, even before you see physical evidence, you begin to move differently. You think differently. You feel differently. And those changes, though internal at first, begin to produce external results. This is not about forcing belief or denying what appears to be happening. It is about understanding that what appears is not final. It is only a reflection of previous assumptions. And just as those assumptions created your current experience, new assumptions can create a new one. So you begin to ask yourself, what am I consistently assuming about my life, about my abilities, about what is possible for me? And more importantly, are these assumptions serving the identity I have chosen to embody? If they are not, then you have the ability to change them, not through struggle, but through quiet persistence. You introduce a new assumption, not as something you hope will happen, but as something you accept as already true. And each time the old pattern tries to reassert itself, you gently return to the new assumption. Over time, this new assumption begins to feel natural. It no longer feels like something you are trying to believe. It becomes something you simply know. And from that knowing, your reality begins to shift in ways that feel almost inevitable. Because what you assume consistently and without contradiction must eventually take form in your experience. So choose your assumptions with care and hold them with certainty. And as you begin to consciously choose your assumptions, something else becomes clear, something that many resist at first, yet it is essential if any real transformation is to occur. You cannot carry your old identity into a new reality. The two are not compatible. One must give way for the other to fully emerge. Most people attempt to create change while still holding on to the same self-image, the same inner story, the same emotional patterns that have defined them for so long. They want new results, yet they remain loyal to the version of themselves that produced the old ones. And so they find themselves moving in circles, touching the edges of change, but never fully stepping into it. There is a certain comfort in the familiar, even when it no longer serves you. The old identity, with all its limitations, feels known. It feels predictable. You know how it thinks, how it reacts, how it sees the world. And because of that familiarity, you may return to it without even realizing it, especially in moments of uncertainty. But if you are to step into a new way of being, you must be willing to release that attachment, not with force, not with resistance, but with understanding. You begin to see that the old identity is not who you truly are. It is simply a pattern you have practiced, a collection of beliefs, reactions, and assumptions that you have repeated so often they have come to feel like truth. And once you see it as a pattern, you are no longer bound by it. This is where a quiet decision must be made. You decide that the past does not define you. You decide that previous experiences, no matter how consistent they have been, do not have the authority to dictate who you are now. You stop referring back to them as evidence of what is possible, and instead you begin to define yourself by the identity you have chosen. This may feel unfamiliar at first. There may be moments when the old thoughts return, when the old reactions attempt to take hold, and in those moments the choice becomes clear. Do you return to what is known, or do you remain faithful to what you have decided to be true about yourself? Each time you choose the new identity, even in the smallest way, you weaken the hold of the old one. Each time you refuse to react as you once did, you create space for something new to take root. It is not a single dramatic act that creates transformation, but a series of quiet, consistent choices. You may notice that certain environments, certain conversations, even certain memories try to pull you back into your former self. They invite you to think as you once thought, to feel as you once felt. But you are no longer obligated to accept that invitation. You can observe it without becoming it. You can acknowledge it without identifying with it. This is what it means to truly detach. Not to deny the past, but to release your identification with it. To understand that who you were is not who you must continue to be. And as you do this, something remarkable begins to happen. The old identity starts to lose its solidity. It becomes less convincing, less automatic. And in its place, the new identity begins to feel more natural, more stable, more real. You begin to recognize yourself differently, not based on what has been, but based on what you have chosen to become. And from this place, your actions, your thoughts, and your experiences begin to align with that new sense of self. Because the moment you truly let go of who you were, you create the space to fully become who you are meant to be. Leave the old self behind. And now, as all of this begins to come together, there is one final shift that brings everything into alignment. It is the shift from waiting for life to happen to living as though it already has. Most people are always looking ahead, always placing their fulfillment somewhere in the future. They say, when this happens, then I will feel complete. When I achieve that, then I will feel confident. When life changes, then I will finally become the person I want to be. But in doing so, they unknowingly keep what they desire just out of reach, because they are constantly identifying with the version of themselves who does not yet have it. They are living in the state of not having and expecting that state to somehow produce having. And it never does. The true shift is to reverse this entirely, to no longer look at your desire as something distant, but as something already fulfilled within you. To move your awareness from the moment of wanting into the feeling of having. Not as imagination alone, but as a present reality you choose to experience now. This is what it means to live from the end result. You are no longer asking, how will it happen, or when will it come? Those questions belong to the mind that still believes it is separate from what it desires. Instead, you assume the position of the one who already is, who already has, who already knows. And from that position, something shifts in a way that is both subtle and profound. Your thoughts begin to reflect completion rather than longing. Your emotions begin to carry a sense of fulfillment rather than anticipation. Even your body responds differently, as if it recognizes that something has already been decided. You are not pretending, you are not forcing belief. You are simply choosing to identify with the version of yourself for whom this is already true. And as you remain in that state, it begins to feel natural, familiar, real. This is where many hesitate, because the outer world may not immediately reflect this inner shift. The senses may still present the old picture, but if you understand what has already been revealed to you, you will not be moved by appearances. You will recognize that the outer world is always a delayed expression of the inner state. It is catching up, not leading. So you remain steady. You return again and again to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not with strain, but with quiet certainty. You think from it when you make decisions. You feel from it when you imagine your life. You respond from it when faced with challenges. And as you do this, you begin to notice something remarkable. The need to chase begins to fade. The urgency begins to dissolve. There is a calm confidence that replaces it, a knowing that what you have accepted within must, in its own way and time, take form in your experience. Opportunities may arise in unexpected ways. Circumstances may begin to shift without force. You may find yourself in the right place at the right time, speaking the right words without having planned any of it, and it will feel natural, almost effortless, because it is simply the outpicturing of the state you have been occupying. This is the difference between living in hope and living in knowing. Hope waits, knowing assumes. Hope looks outward for signs. Knowing rests inward in certainty. So do not wait for the world to tell you that it is done. Do not look for permission in external results. Decide within yourself that it already is, and allow your life to unfold from that decision. Live as though it is already yours.